Welcome to EIFA Island Discs, where a faith leader or representative shares the music that they love and its personal significance to their life. 4 tracks are chosen and the ubiquitous wildcard, an extra choice afforded to our guests simply because 4 was simply not enough. In the style of the famous radio program, we'll unveil each piece of music in turn, and our guests will share a little of its personal significance to them. Undoubtedly, we'll uncover some new music together, and hopefully we'll get to know each other a little bit better too. Today's guest, as you can see on screen, is Professor Joe Goldblatt. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you, Reverend Peter Fairbrother. It's a pleasure to be with you.
It's lovely to see you. Lovely to have you with us today. Thank you. A few words of introduction about Joe. Professor Joe is chair of the Edinburgh Interfaith Association and a well-kent face on Facebook and many forms of social media. Also, Emeritus Professor of Planned Events at Queen Margaret University. He is an author of the world's first textbook in the field of events management, and he subsequently published 39 additional books in the field. He is a member of the Edinburgh Jewish community and has been married to Nancy for 45 years. They are the parents of Max and Sam and grandparents of Hamish and Guthrie. Thank you very much again, Joe, for joining us today. It's really lovely to see you in this context as a guest rather than a host. And I'd like to ask, maybe to begin, what was it like choosing 5 songs, only 5 songs, to represent important memories and aspects of your life? How did you find that process?
Peter, it was very difficult, and I'll tell you why. I'm a big fan of the actress Carol Channing, who starred in the musical Hello, Dolly. And anytime I have a serious dental procedure, I always ask the dentist if I can put headphones on and listen to the track of Hello, Dolly. Well, one time I did this, the dentist was very pleasant, and afterwards I said, "How did the procedure go?" He said, "Everything went very well." He said, "But I need an aspirin." I said, "Why?" He said, "I can't stand Carol Channing." So although I love Carol Channing and I love the upbeat music of Jerry Herman, who wrote not only Hello, Dolly, but also Mame, La Cage aux Folles, and other musicals, I wanted to choose things that would be more spiritual for today. And so I had to really give this some thought. And I'm glad that I was able to switch between what is popular and what is meaningful. And I think I found some meaningful tunes for us today.
Alas, no Hello Dolly in your 5 choices, but
not today.
I can certainly verify some beautiful music is ahead. Just to inform our viewers and listeners, sadly, due to copyrights that Facebook and others require us to adhere to, we can't play any excerpts from the songs. However, Joe's choices will be available attached in some way, shape or form or around this this video, and you'll be able to connect to the songs on YouTube and listen to them to yourself, and perhaps connect to your own memories and sense of the musicality. So without further ado, we will introduce your first choice. We have a visual cue that will bring it to our viewers and listeners' attention. Your first song, well, it just had to be you, didn't it? Joe, would you like to describe why you chose Harry Connick Jr.'s version of this as one of your music choices?
Yes, you know, in the old days, men and women, or men and men, or women and women, or others who were dating had a favorite song that they shared, because music marks not only memories, but also milestones in our lives. And this is my wife and my favorite song. We didn't have this played necessarily at our wedding 45 years ago, but it is certainly a song that we play throughout the year. Even in our own lounge during lockdown, we get up and dance to this song, because we met in a very unusual way. I was a professional mime nearly 50 years ago, and my wife Nancy was also a professional clown. And one day I was walking down the street, and what do I see but a sign that says Leonard the Clown Juggling Lessons. Well, I thought the name Leonard sounded like a man's name, a boy's name. So I climbed up the stairs of the steep dance studio, and at the top of the stairs, Peter was the most beautiful pair of legs I've ever seen in my life in tights. And then above that was a red leotard, and above that was a red ribbon with a gold bell that jingled on her neck. And above that was white face makeup with red hearts and a red nose. And I fell instantly in love. Well, it had to be you. It had to be you. It had to be you. I wandered around, finally found somebody who. And that's my favorite song because it reminds me of Nancy.
You paint a very vivid picture of how you first met Nancy. Would I be right in saying there's a bit of a romantic in you, Joe?
I think so. I love romance. And you know, I asked her out for a date immediately, not seeing her real face, just her white face. And I think there was just a chemistry, that connected. And we were lucky to find each other. Not everyone finds the right person in their life. And I actually had a first marriage that lasted only a brief time. And so I wondered if I would ever find the right person. And so the song It Had to Be You is a perfect match for us.
Beautiful, really lovely. And I'm very tickled by your description of your first encounter, I must say. The red leotard with the matching red nose just is a very striking image.
She was gorgeous. She was absolutely gorgeous. Still is.
Yes, it's a beautiful song in itself and beautiful memories that accompany it for you, Joe. So thank you very much for sharing. Our second song is, I'm very pleased to say, a native of my home country. It's Brian Kennedy and his version of You Raise Me Up, a song which I'm sure many of our listeners and viewers will be familiar with. What's its special significance to you, Joe?
Well, I was unfamiliar with this song by Brian Kennedy until my friend Allison Russell sent it to me. And she said, Joe, I think this is the right time in your life, the right moment for you to meet my friend, Brian Kennedy. And indeed, I was having, as people have from time to time, a period of minor depression and concern and uncertainty. And then I listened to these words and to his beautiful tenor voice, and I was raised up. Why was I raised up? Because it's a song that talks about all of us are part of a journey. We stand on the shoulders of those who came before us. And so even in our darkest hour, we can draw on the strength, in my case, of my father, of my grandfather, of other relatives and friends who had had similar troubles. And their strength gave me the foundation to put one foot in front of the others and keep moving ahead. And so thank you, Brian Kennedy. You do raise me up.
He has a remarkable voice, Joe, I must say. And I'm very touched that you decided to share with us today that some of the challenges that you faced in life and some of the difficulties. Unfortunately, there still remains a tremendous taboo around talking about times when we might feel low or depressed. And it's wonderful to hear of your connection to the music, which, as you say, lifted your spirits in ways that were very profound for you.
I have to say, Peter, that while music is important, I find that when someone is severely depressed, it helps to have a mixture of various tools, techniques, methods to not only get through that terrible time, but to also have what I call a breakthrough moment where you're able to look back and say, that was very difficult, but now on to the next part, the next chapter of my life. And so some of the tools and techniques that I've used over the years are certainly music, but also the practice daily of mindfulness, my morning meditation, which I do every morning, a visit occasionally to a psychologist to get a professional third-party opinion to provide support and encouragement. And most importantly, I try to project 1 year ahead. I don't know where I learned this, but someone told me that maybe it was with the death of a loved one. You know, in the Jewish tradition, we have actually 1 year of mourning. So at the end of a year, we unveil the tombstone. So we have that year to process the loss, the death. Doesn't mean the pain goes away or the sadness is over. It just means you're in a different place a year later. So I try to use that kind of thinking with sadness and depression. I think what I've just heard today, this news is terrible, horrible. How will I feel 1 year from now? And then I try and put myself in that place of a year later, psychologically. And that seems to help, that I know that things will indeed be different later.
Thank you very much for sharing some of those tools in terms of helping and supporting one during those times of difficulty. I think being minded of mindfulness and the impermanence of all things, it does certainly help to project ahead and to give thought to how things might change. And I know for many people I've spoken to, that is a very helpful tool. Thank you very much for revealing that in terms of one of your means of supporting yourself in difficult times. You touched upon your Jewish faith, and that kind of leads us by kind of clunky segue, forgive me, Joe, to your third song. And it is indeed a blessing in itself to listen to, and also in other ways as well. Would you like to introduce your third track?
Yes, dear Debbie Friedman, who sadly we lost much too soon at a very young, tender age. She probably was the leading Jewish folk singer of her generation, and she inspired most of the synagogue music in the United States in the Reform and Liberal tradition, because her music is so accessible. This song, Mi Shabera, is the Jewish prayer for healing. And whenever someone shares with me that they're unwell, perhaps they have cancer or they're having a procedure in the hospital, I always send them the clip and the transcription of Debbie Friedman singing Mi Shabera, because the Mi Shabera prayer is simply that you are asking God or whoever you worship for complete healing, which we call a refuah shlama in Hebrew. So we ask for complete healing for this person. We also ask for the absence of pain, because with suffering, with healing, often pain is associated. So we ask for pain to be removed. And I just love the way she sings Avotenu so beautifully to connect with the heartstrings. And I think it does promote healing. Don't you think that music is a great tool for healing, Peter?
Oh, very much so. As you've described earlier, I have a number of songs that mean a great deal to me, and the times where I might feel low or out of sorts. Being able to reconnect to the music I love is so nourishing and so cherishing. And I must confess, I wasn't familiar with Debbie's work before our time together, and listening to this morning, in fact, before we met. It's such a beautiful piece of music, and the resonance from it in terms of healing, it's very palpable, very palpable. And she's got a really nice rapport with her audiences when she performs this live, I see.
She's absolutely wonderful. The other thing that's interesting to me about music and healing is every week I have lunch with a friend who has Alzheimer's. And so his memory short term is not very good. But his long term memory of music is brilliant. And one day we were at the Royal Botanical Gardens having lunch. And when we left, a downpour started. And I mean a big deluge. And I turned to him and I said, Charlie, let's do Singing in the Rain. I'm singing in the rain, just singing in the rain. Up went our umbrellas, and two men in their 70s are dancing through the botanics, singing in the rain. And do you know, he knew every word to that song. It was amazing. He couldn't remember where he was that morning, but he could remember those words. And so I think music has a great capacity to heal folk who have mental health or challenges with dementia or early stage Alzheimer's.
Very much so. And the Scottish-based organisation Playlist for Life supports individuals, family and friends, as well as people with dementia, to connect to a sense of themselves, to their memories, and to their communities through the use of music as a therapeutic intervention. And yeah, it's a very powerful and a very gentle therapy for so many people. You're painting so many vivid images for me this morning, Joe, and thinking of the pair of you dancing in the rain. If I'd known you'd been this musical, I would have brought you along to each and every EIFA Island Discs show to give us some musical input that enables us to get around copyright. So thank you, Joe. Thank you very, very much. And the lovely Debbie, what a wonderful choice. May I ask, just touching upon, obviously you described what this piece of music means and its expression as a form of healing and supporting healing. How important is your Jewish faith and heritage to you?
You know, it's interesting. I have many friends who are now going through what I call gender euphoria. They've moved from gender dysphoria to gender euphoria, embracing the ambiguity of gender and the choices that they're having to make. And some have said to me, how do you feel about my choice? And I've said, well, if you were to ask me the same question about Judaism, I would simply answer, I have no choice. It is part of my DNA. Because Judaism is not just a religion, it's a culture. It's a culture cultivated over 5,000 years. And so as part of that culture, I look back centuries to my parents, my grandparents, to ancestors who perished in the pogroms, the Holocaust, to ancestors who go all the way back to Israel, to Palestine. And so I don't see Judaism as something that I chose. I see Judaism as something that is indeed completely organic in my being. Maybe it has to do because it focuses so much on intellectualism. And although I'm not the world's greatest intellectual, I have always been someone who's intellectually curious. And that allows me to explore it through my faith in Judaism. There are Jewish people, Peter, who believe strongly in God and heaven above, and there are those who are actually agnostic or even atheist, but identify culturally as Jewish. So there's room in Judaism for a wide range of opinion. Years ago, I received an email from a young man in one of our Scottish islands, and he said, I am transgender. Is there a place for me in Judaism? Well, I was surprised to get this email. I had given a talk at his school about Judaism years ago, and he had never forgotten, evidently, me and the words that I said. So he found me on the internet, wrote this question to me, is there a place for a transgender person in Judaism? And I wrote back and I said, Judaism is like a big tree. I happen to be on the lowest branch because I rarely go to synagogue. I am not a great student of the Torah or the Talmud, but I'm deeply devoted to my faith through social action, through how I live my life as a Jewish person in terms of my moral compass and ethical compass. And I said, some people have a much higher branch. The strict Orthodox walk to synagogue only on Saturday, only eat kosher foods. And then I said, somewhere in between that branch and my branch, there's a branch for you. And he took some comfort for that, because he realized that Judaism is a big tree and there would be opportunities for him to explore different branches. So I share that with you because for me, Judaism is simply a part of my being. I'll tell you something very interesting, Peter. There's a book that's going to be published in March called What Does a Jew Look Like? And it's portraits of Jewish people all over the world. And I was chosen as the Jew from Scotland.
Well done.
They took a photograph of me with my tartan standing in Holyrood Park, and it turned out to be a nice photo. But after this terrible attempted assassination at the Colleyville, Texas synagogue of Jews, the act of anti-Semitism, I thought, oh my goodness, I've just put a target on myself. If somebody wants to kill a Jew from Scotland, I'm their man. I'm the Jew from Scotland. My picture's going in this publication and probably others. And then I thought, so what?
Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing your vulnerability in that as well. That's very powerful. It's a beautiful metaphor that you painted around the tree and the different branches, and feeds into that sense of the organic that you described in terms of your faith and your heritage. It's a lovely thought that there are branches that each of us can occupy within that tree. Thank you. Thank you very much. John Denver. This was, I know the artist very well. The song I wasn't familiar with, but if I were to characterize the choices that you've made today, if I might be so audacious to do that, there's a great sensitivity running through the pieces of music as I perceive them that you've chosen. Why was today your fourth choice?
Well, as you mentioned in my introduction, I'm a practitioner of mindfulness. And I became a practitioner about 10 years ago when I was teaching at Queen Margaret University here in Edinburgh. I have degrees from George Washington University, so that's why I mentioned that. But when I was teaching at Queen Margaret University, the Scottish government provided funding for faculty to learn mindfulness, to help us become more mindful and also to use it pedagogically with our students. And so I signed up. My dean approved my application, and for an entire semester, every Wednesday afternoon between 12 and 5, I was able to practice mindfulness. It was part of my workload to be mindful. I thought that was brilliant. Well, then I decided to transfer my skills to our students. And the next autumn in the classroom, I said, we're going to try something different before each lecture. We're going to have a 5-minute mindfulness moment in which I'll lead you through mindfulness practice. And anecdotally, the students all said they greatly appreciated it. It really helped with their concentration, their thinking, their relaxation. But when I conducted a questionnaire at the end of the semester and asked the question, shall we continue mindfulness? The split was 40 yes, 60 nay. Well, I was surprised. It's only 5 minutes time, but 60%, the majority said no. And then over the festive season, I thought about it, and I came to the conclusion, despite the vote, we should continue and try and find a new way to connect with the students. And so in the new semester, I conducted the practice for the first 2 sessions, and then I selected students randomly from the class to do every subsequent week to lead the mindfulness. And when we conducted the same questionnaire at the end of that semester, it was 90% continue forever and only 10% hesitant about it. So when students have role models that are their age and at their sensitivity, it seems to make a difference. And so what I love about John Denver's song is it's all about mindfulness. It's about focusing on today, not worrying about tomorrow, not worrying about yesterday, but focusing on today and making a difference today. And I find that's very helpful through the daily practice of mindfulness. And the Edinburgh Interfaith Association has embraced mindfulness as well. We've started a new program, Peter, called Faithful Fridays. Every Friday, we will be releasing a 15-minute video on the internet. 10 minutes of this is a devotion, a message of wisdom, and it's followed then by 5 minutes of practice of mindfulness led by an experienced practitioner. And I'm pleased to tell you, dear friends who are watching and listening today, Reverend Peter Fairbrother will be appearing on this program, and I hope you'll join us for his words of wisdom followed by mindfulness.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for the plug. It's a lovely song by John Denver. Did you ever get a sense from the students why the 60% said nay in the first instance? What were the barriers or the issues that they presented around mindfulness?
Anecdotally, they said to me, they didn't want to devote even 5 minutes to something out with what they deemed as purely educational. The reason for this partly is because the number of class time hours that students have, and this was even before the pandemic, is actually very limited in a university classroom. And so they wanted every minute to be fed information, ideas, theory, etc. But as I said to them, an athlete can't win a race without proper conditioning and a warm-up. And therefore, if you're going to win in intellectual development, you need to take 5 minutes and warm up your brain. And I know you'll find this hard to believe, but they usually don't arrive very early for class. In fact, some come in a few minutes late. And so there isn't that time before to practice, to be ready to learn. And so that's why I incorporated that in all my lectures. And now I give speeches all over the world, either on Zoom or in person, as I'll be doing in the spring in New York City. And I always begin with 5 minutes of mindfulness.
Lovely. It's a really lovely practice. And lovely to hear how the students eventually managed to take an ownership and find a way to connect with it that was personal to them, that changed their mind about its benefits, which is really lovely.
And by the way, I had read, Peter, in studying mindfulness, that in some situations in high schools in the United States, their student marks, final marks, grades actually rose post mindfulness practice. And I thought, that's really interesting. I wonder if that will be the case in my classroom. And indeed it was, because I hadn't changed any other variable in the classroom. Nothing else had changed. Same exam I had been given with occasional new questions, and the marks rose significantly. So I do believe it can be a very effective tool for cultivating intellectual development.
Very much so. I would agree with you on that, most certainly. It's lovely to see John Denver enter into your list of 5 songs. And speaking of which, your 5th, sadly, that we have, which we call this the wild card, Joe. I don't know why we call it the wild card. We wanted originally to hold with 4 songs, but our guests were so insistent about having a 5th, so we thought we would add an extra one in. And I'm glad we did. 5 is a nice number, and this is a nice song to conclude your selection with. I'm sure it's one that many of us will be familiar with, but perhaps not with the artist. Would you like to outline your 5th song, please?
Yes, I would. Well, Joyce DiDonato, I'll start there, is a major opera star from a little town called Prairie Village, Kansas, in the Midwest of the United States. And she's a major star of the Metropolitan Opera. This summer, she appeared with the Edinburgh International Festival as a solo artist, but I've seen her many times on the Met Opera and high definition broadcast in the cinema. And she just has this lyric mezzo-soprano voice that just speaks not just to your heart, but to your soul. Now the song. Somewhere Over the Rainbow is a song that was composed by a Jewish gentleman in the 1930s during the depths of World War II. And when he composed this song, he had in his mind that it was the story of immigrants fleeing to America as he and his family had done. And America was the rainbow. Somewhere over the rainbow, dreams come true. And this was his hope that as a result of immigrating to America with his family, they would be saved from the Nazi persecution and Holocaust, and their dreams would come true. The first person I heard sing this song, of course, was the magnificent and magical Judy Garland, who sang this song as a young teenager in the film The Wizard of Oz. And I, like so many, was deeply touched by her version of this song. And then later, just in the last 2 years, Joyce DiDonato has recorded this song. And I think she's brought an additional dimension to it. I first saw her deliver this song at the Proms a few years ago, live, and you could hear a pin drop in the Royal Albert Hall. That's how powerful her rendition of this wonderful song was. So I love the way Judy and Joyce both in this song, when they say, somewhere over the rainbow, dreams come true. Why, oh, why can't I? It's a song about hope. And I think hope is something we need to pursue every day.
Most definitely. It's her rendition is magical. Dear listeners and viewers, we will, of course, as I mentioned at the beginning, post a link to a YouTube recording of her singing this song. And as you say, Joe, Joyce is a Kansas native, which is an extra layer of connection to the words that were written. And yeah, an absolutely beautiful song. Thank you for sharing your 5 tracks. You have painted some very vivid pictures in your memories, ranging from lovely legs and red noses, through to dancing in the rain, through to the wonderful practice of mindfulness and the gentle beauty of Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And that message of hope, particularly in these difficult and challenging times, feels so important, Joe. So important. And the colours of the rainbow and the vibrancies, yes, it's just a real cherishing of the diverse and complex and contradictory and beautiful world that we live in. Joe, you have painted beautiful memories with your voice and your song and with your words, and I would like to thank you ever so much for being a fellow islander today.
It was my pleasure being on this desert island with Reverend Peter Fairbrother. I cannot think of a better companion during these challenging times.
Thank you ever so much, Joe, and likewise, and may you enjoy these pieces of music and many more in the time ahead. Thank you, Joe.